We're coming on the air at this hour because we have breaking news. President Trump has just announced on social media that the U.S. has just completed 3 successful attacks on 3 nuclear sites in Iran. This is the post that he put out just a short time ago. We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That statement from President Trump right there, if you'll remember, he gave a 2-week deadline for him to consider whether or not he was going to use those bunker-busting bombs on that Iranian nuclear site. And now the president making that decision tonight and following through. Let's go ahead and bring in our Rachel Scott, our White House correspondent, who's been following all of this very closely. Rachel, we know that the president was meeting with his national security team tonight, and it seems like they had big plans and followed through.
This comes after a series of meetings that the president has had with his national security team in the Situation Room, in which the president was really mulling over this decision of whether the United States should get directly involved. I will tell you, the president really warming up to this idea, especially over the last several days. I spoke to him by phone just 1 week ago. At that point, he told me that it's possible that the United States could get it right now. That was the realm of possibility. Still looking for a dramatic approach. Time for Iran to come to the table, make a new remarkable turn. President heading to the summit.
Forgive me if we could, Rachel, forgive me if we could pause for a moment because we're having some trouble with your cell phone reception. We'll try to come back to you in just a minute there. I'm being told that we do have someone else on the phone with us. Molly, could you repeat that? General Abrams is joining us now on the phone. General, obviously this news is just coming in. We knew this is something that the president was considering. He was meeting with his top national security officials tonight. But he did give that 2-week time period that he was going to consider all of this. What do you think changed?
Well, Whit, I think, first off, I think the president preserved all options. And by putting a 2-week timeline on, he probably intentionally gave the Iranians sort of a feel that they had time to sort of gather themselves and gather their defense, which really provided an opportunity for our Air Force crews, our air crews, to have the element of surprise. And so they were able to get in and get out, as reported by the president, safely, which we're all very thankful for. And we're going to have to wait a couple of days to see how much success they had.
All right, General, thank you so much. We'll try to check back with you in just a moment, but I do want to get to our Ian panel, who's been following all of this very closely. Ian, I believe you are still there on the ground in Israel. What can you tell us about what you're learning?
Yeah, this is a major event. I mean, we have been speaking to Israeli officials over the last few days, and they were certainly making it clear to us that this 2-week window that had been set up by President Trump was unrealistic. One official said to me, without agreeing to be quoted, they felt that it was going to be much quicker than that. Remember, they have hit a number of facilities across Iran. It's now 10 days since the first bombs were dropped by Israel on Iran. But the difficulty was this one particular facility at Fordow. It's buried deep inside a mountain, and it was felt that Israel, in fact no other nation, would have the necessary ordnance nor the aircraft capable of carrying out a mission that would be capable of destroying that. Now, we have to wait and see a bomb damage assessment, see how successful it's been. Nevertheless, we were reporting and we're hearing that U.S. stealth bombers have been moved closer to the area, to Diego Garcia, which is it's owned by Mauritius. It's got a British base there, and that has been the base in the Indian Ocean that would allow American bombers to be within much closer striking distance to Iran. And as the president has said, it looks like the U.S. bombers have taken place. So as we were reporting again, it was the likely the B-2 stealth bombers, which is the only bomber in the world that's capable of carrying these MOPs, these massive ordnance projectiles, these very heavy bombs. But what makes them specific is they're able to dig into the ground. In other words, they don't explode the second they touch the ground. They physically dig down into the land and then detonate. And because the depth of Fordow was so deep, it was felt that this was needed. Now, Israeli officials have been making clear to me that if President Trump decided not to act or delayed his decision, that they would act anyway. And we have to wait and hear from Israeli officials what their role in this is. It is possible, of course, that this would be a one-off strike. I think that's less likely. It could be part of a complex of military action, not necessarily all strikes, perhaps something on the ground. There've been intelligence gathering about this facility. I mean, Israeli officials have been telling us that they're very upbeat, that they feel they've been enormously successful so far. They've already set back Iran's nuclear energy production. Of course, the Israelis in particular, and certainly President Trump, were concerned that their production of highly enriched uranium had got to this point, to 60% of production, that it could very easily then be transferred into weapons-grade uranium. And that was something that the International Atomic Energy Agency, an independent UN agency, had said was the situation, that Iran had basically doubled its production of this material, and Israel had seen that as an existential threat, that having dealt with the other so-called enemies in the neighborhood, dealt with Hamas, dealt with Hezbollah in Lebanon, in Syria, you've had a change of regime, that it was actually Iran was the one remaining piece of the puzzle. And in order to ensure the safety of the state of Israel, then they had to be sure that Iran was no longer capable of being within weeks of producing potentially weapons-grade uranium. Now, we know that the U.S. intelligence community, this has been a dispute between the president and his own director of national intelligence and the intelligence community, whether Iran had the intent to make a nuclear weapon. No one's seen any evidence to say that was the case. The issue is that they had the capability, and the judgment in an intelligence and political way was too much. So what we know from the president is that there has been this bombing run. The president described it as successful. It has hit a number of sites, including Fordow, this uranium facility, which was a hidden facility up until a few years ago. It was actually President Obama who announced to the world the existence of this. And there's always been concern that even though there were agreements with Iran in place for a while, they were torn up by President Trump, the JCPOA, this nuclear a treaty which basically meant that Iran was not supposed to enrich uranium up to a certain amount and certainly wasn't supposed to use it for nefarious purposes, that actually the reality on the ground was that Iran was not abiding, at least by the spirit, if not by the letter, of this agreement, and that had continued to raise concerns. Israel, for years, has been flagging what the situation is, but I think two things had happened, and I've heard this from Israeli officials. The two strikes that took place by Iran on Israeli soil and by Israel on Iranian soil last year were indicators to Israel that they were seeing things that were of grave concern to them, and that they felt that the window of opportunity was open, and that if they didn't act preemptively, then they could get to the point where it would be too late for them to respond. That's certainly what Israeli military and political officials will tell you here. So that is the situation. It is an important development. We've already seen some reaction from certainly the Iranian media, adverse reaction to America's role. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, had already threatened retaliation against America if this took place. There is a lot of nervousness in the region. Here in Israel, for example, the American military has been evacuating American diplomats and their families who wish to get out the area. Everyone has been put on high alert. There are a lot of American troops stationed throughout the region, not least in Iran, where there are a lot of pro-Iranian militias, and also inside Syria. Syria obviously is more benign territory, but it doesn't mean that there aren't bad actors there, and that will will be of concern as well. Diplomatic, military and civilian ties. And of course, the State Department have been advising any American citizen to get out of Iran. That will also prove extremely difficult at the moment. But certainly, I would say in terms of foreign policy, this is the most important, most significant moment of President Trump's second term. Whit?
Ian, panel for us, thank you very much.